Okay, we are live with my guest today, Ron Wexler, co-founder and CTO of Wex Energy. Welcome to School of Fish.
Thanks so much for having me, John. Good to be here.
We've been talking about getting you on the show for a while now, but as a follow-up to the conversation we were having yesterday, I thought it'd be good to get this in before year end. For everyone that's listening, would love for them to hear about your background and kind of where it all started for Ron Wexler.
Okay, so I'll try not to go all the way to the very, very beginning. However, when asked about, I'll say my technical background, and what honestly has shaped me and really led to my work in the area that Wex Energy is pursuing. Turns out my father worked on the Manhattan Project. And when you grow up with somebody like that, it gives you a worldview in terms of the technology and science part of the world, that we should be working on big problems and not just working on them. We need to solve them. And having a role model like my dad and what he did was very important. My background, very quickly, educationally, background is mainly in chemistry, MIT undergraduate, University of California, Berkeley for my PhD. I was a research fellow at Caltech, all in chemistry departments. I then spent over 20 years at Eastman Kodak Company in Rochester, New York, where we still are, doing everything from inventing a lot of things in the lab and ultimately working on intellectual property. And all of that has helped shape the work that I've put into Wex Energy.
We're definitely going to dive into Wex. So just to kind of focus on the history of in your experience, having, like you said, a father that it sounds like was also very science or technologically focused. Is that something that, looking back, you felt like you had that in your DNA, or those skills evolved by virtue of being around someone like that as your father or the father figure, teaching you how to be more thinking along those lines?
Well, my dad let me choose the path that I wanted. It just turned out that even back in early grade school, I loved math. And that then evolved in high school. I had wonderful chemistry and physics teachers there, so I started to shift over into the sciences. But being around somebody with he had a PhD in chemical physics and was at Stagg Field for the first controlled nuclear reaction. When you're around that, it makes a difference.
A better question is, what did you guys talk about at the dinner table growing up? That's probably more interesting.
Honestly, not science so much.
Okay.
Mainly because it would have left my mother and sister out of the conversation.
There you go. And then when you went to MIT and was a chemistry major, I remember, and I have a lot of friends that took, kind of beginner chemistry, let's call it chemistry 101 in college. And I wasn't planning on being a science major. Is that a course, even for someone like you, or a degree that comes fairly easy, or even for someone like you that's equipped to handle it? It's still a grind and, a huge undertaking to do well in a program like that.
So with respect to, I'll say, the Chem 101, I took enough chemistry before I got to MIT that kind of course really wasn't where I went.
Chem 901, we'll call it.
But at MIT, I made a decision that I was going to work hard, and I did. When you go to the schools I went to, you realize there are a lot of people way smarter than I am, okay? And honestly, I would say the same thing of my father. But I decided that I was going to work very hard. In fact, my goal was to get straight A's at MIT in all my chemistry classes, which I was able to do successfully. But that has to do with a mindset and saying, I'm going to set out to do something and go and do it. So did I waltz through MIT? Not by a long shot. It was a lot of hard work, but it was a wonderful environment.
Got it. And a lot of the people that you went to school with at MIT and Berkeley, what are the types of professions that those people went on, your classmates, to be in? What fields or what roles in society that are they playing?
So I'll say many took a similar path to what I took, ending up in industry. One of my best friends in graduate school was a senior fellow at DuPont. And in fact, I reconnected with him, and he actually has advised Wex Energy because of his background in polymers and adhesives. So honestly, it's all over the map. Many others went the academic route and ended up being professors and successful in that area. And I know others decided after going through that type of a program that they no longer wanted to actually do the science and technology stuff and ended up doing maybe more policy types of activities.
Got it. And then how many years did you spend at Eastman Kodak from start to finish?
So I was for about 22 years.
Okay. And for our younger audience, I know Kodak is still relevant, but it was more so, I'm sure, years ago during its heyday was probably when you were working there. How do you explain what Eastman Kodak did in the world and kind of the impact it had for the everyday person?
Sure. Really, all the time that I was at Kodak, the company was about capturing memories for people. Now, it's a very different world today, where capturing memories on a smartphone, often those memories will ultimately get buried in so many pictures that people might take. The heyday of Kodak, actually, I think I would say preceded when I arrived, where it was really about imaging, that is, capturing images on film, and to be able to capture people's moments and lives was, I'll say, much more involved and difficult when I first started there than it is today. Right now, if you wanted to literally capture pictures or videos of your whole life, if you had enough storage, you could do that. And there's some people, I think, who come pretty close to that.
Totally.
So one other thing that I will say is, in my time there, and once I started working on intellectual property, I actually worked a couple doors down from the gentleman who actually invented the first digital camera. That is, the first digital imaging was actually done by Kodak, patented and created there.
And to those making it to the 9-minute mark of this interview, we will not be auctioning off that camera to a lucky listener on today's
that's
show.
That's not me. That was the guy who worked a couple doors down.
I know. I'm just kidding. And so, today, and I'll do my explanation, Wex Energy really sits at the forefront of the movement around sustainability and efficiency and on and on and on. I think that it's only a matter of time before the invention and the technology that you and your team have been able to create has a further place in the home and an apartment and other kind of modes. How do you explain Wex? And then I also want you to go into the how you invented. I view you as an inventor, how you came up with the idea. So maybe flip it, actually. how'd you come up with the idea of Wex, and ultimately what is Wex delivering in the marketplace?
So it turns out I'm doing this interview not in my own office, which is actually one floor down from where I am. Uh, but that is where the Wex Energy products were first conceived. Working in my home office, weather not unlike it is right now here in Rochester, it's probably in the mid to upper 20s Fahrenheit. So it's cold outside, and I have 7 windows in my office, and I would be very cold on a day like today. And in the summertime, again, because of solar heat gain coming through the windows, I would be baking in the summertime. And I decided I got to find a solution to this because replacing those windows would, it's just so expensive. So what I ended up doing was actually looking at a product that many people actually try to use. Many of them will say, yeah, I tried that once. And the product is something that you can buy in home improvement stores. It's a little kit with very flimsy plastic film and double-sided tape, and you get a hair dryer and you tape it up to the window and get the hair dryer out, and that's supposed to give you additional insulation. But when you look at reviews of those products online, you find that there are a lot of, I'll say, objections. And what I set out to do was address all of those objections and see, can I come up with a product that will deliver all of the pluses of improving the energy efficiency of the window without the objections? And the answer is what we're selling today, Polar Skins and Solar Skins.
And as a inventor, which I am definitely, I have many ideas through the years, and I could probably figure out how to invent something formally. But so you're sitting in your home office, you're freezing, or you're overheating in the summer. What is like step 2? Okay, you have this epiphany, this light bulb moment. What are steps 2 and 3 for maybe someone out there that says, I want to be an inventor? What do you actually do to take it from that early idea to something else?
So this is where, again, I'll say the second half of my time at Kodak comes into play, because I spent a lot of time with inventors and project teams to come up with not only concepts, but go through them in terms of, well, what's really viable here? So the steps involved are, number one, am I solving a real problem? Okay, I would say that's the first question that I asked in this case. And going online, seeing what else is out there, that's one way to go about it. But in this case, I would say the fact that I had this problem in my home. Look, you and I are relatively well off compared to the vast majority of people in the world, and the places that we live are solid homes and well constructed. If I had that problem in my home, then it has to be a universal problem that everybody is experiencing. And understanding that aspect at an early stage is actually very important as well. That is, how much of an impact can my invention be? Because if it's something that solves a problem that only John Fishman has, well, unless John Fishman's willing to spend a lot of money on whatever my invention is, it's probably not worth pursuing. So that kind of assessment has to be part of the early process. Now, coming from an intellectual property background as I do, I go to doing patent searches. That is, I may be able to come up with what I would think is an invention, a concept, but if somebody else has already figured it out, I may not be aware of it. So I go and check that as well. Once I've cleared those hurdles, now it's a question of getting down to, well, what do I know from my background? And also, very importantly, who do I know that can help me get from what I know to what would be a really good solution. So while I did a lot of the inventing for Wex Energy's products, it also involved talking to and working with other consultants, some of whom actually came from my former Kodak network that were very helpful. Others were people that I got introduced to along the way that ultimately led to good solutions for this problem. And when you look at our patents and patent applications, a lot of the well, they all have my name on them. Some of them do have the names of other people, and that's because they come from a different perspective and can see other solutions that I may not see.
Got it. And so when you go down, and that was very helpful, you go through those steps, you kind of figure out what you're trying to solve for, you put the team together, the product is, in essence, is starting to come together conceptually. From where you thought the product itself would be, how it would be built, or all the different elements to where it is today, is that a night and day comparison? Or your initial inklings on how this technology and product would be built is ultimately kind of where it landed, and you were spot on with how you were approaching it?
I'm not going to say that I was spot on, but again, because of my experience working in industry and having successfully commercialized my inventions and those of people that I worked with closely, I had a good sense for how should the product be constructed so it would be manufacturable. As just because you can make it in your kitchen or in your basement does not mean that there is a manufacturable product. And by manufacturable, it really comes down to, can it be made at low enough cost so that the marketplace will accept it? And this is a very important part of Wex Energy's approach, which gets to, if we don't have a product that is affordable for many, many people and easy for them to install, to order, all the things that are needed to get a product into a customer's hands. If it's not easy and affordable, I have to find something else to do with my time. But because I came from a background that involved manufacturing and getting an idea into manufacturing, I was able to, I think in some ways, short circuit stumbling blocks because I already knew how I had to address certain things. So back to your question, is it close to what I started with? In fact, yes, because I had a bias toward, how am I going to make this thing? I knew kind of what I wanted to do, but I put a bias of, I've got to be able to manufacture.
Got it. And ultimately this thing, right, the suite of Wex Energy products, which for easy explanation, we'll focus on the polar skin and the solar skin. Right. What is this product, Ron?
So the product, again, from the, if it's not affordable and easy standpoint, is the physics is really simple. What we do is we add an additional air gap to the glass portion of a rectangular window. Now, it turns out having an air gap is how the original double pane windows were first made back in around the 1950s. So knowing that that concept works is already unknown. It's not like, you're doing 20 years of scientific research to see if there's some new phenomenon. This is basic physics, very well defined. The hard part is, how do you make it in a way that is low cost and still efficient, adds the energy efficiency that we're looking for. So what we do is we take a sheet of plastic and we put around the perimeter ways to attach it to the window easily and quickly, as well as seal in the air between the sheet of plastic and the existing window pane.
And then by doing that, right, which I've seen, and I use the word transparent, but maybe it should be translucent, right? It is transparent.
No, please, transparent,
Okay.
not translucent.
Meaning that it goes on the inside of the window. Someone sitting in a room has the same view through the glass. It's as if it's not there, so to say. What ultimately is the benefit to someone that's installing a window skin on their window?
So there's more than one. But basically, we live and work inside buildings to maintain comfort. I don't want to be outdoors today because it's 20 degrees outside. So you will be more comfortable if someone were sitting like you are within 5 feet, 6 feet of a window, and it's very cold outside. Well, it's very likely, unless you have enough insulation in that window, that you will be uncomfortable near that window. So it comes down to comfort, and related to that ultimately is being comfortable without using excessive amounts of energy. One way to deal with the issue I just told you, if you look at your background, John,
Yeah.
in back of you to the left, there's a radiator. Well, one way to stay comfortable is just to crank that up. So now I've got nice, real hot air just pouring out of that to kind of keep the cold at bay. But there's a better way. And the better way is add the insulation. It's there 24/7, 365. You don't have to do anything. You add the insulation. But now you're not losing that heat out the window. So you save money and you maintain comfort.
Right.
That's really what it's about. And then with solar skin, one additional aspect is we can significantly cut down what's called solar heat gain. So in the summertime, you'll probably have air conditioning coming out of that vent, and you'd have to crank that way up if the sun was beating on you through those windows. So we are able to, for warm, sunny areas, to be able to knock down that solar heat gain. And that, again, leads to significant improvement of comfort as well as saving on your electric bill.
Right. And obviously, this idea manifested multiple years ago. And I feel like when you talk about right idea, right time in history, there is this huge movement towards initiatives that should and will support installations that improve solar heat gain, energy efficiency, I think carbon zero, right? Right, things
net
like
zero
that.
Buildings,
Yeah, net zero.
decreased carbon footprint, however you want to speak of it.
Right. And so with the outcome that you're describing, comfortability and cost savings, and I'm sure other things as well, even just wear and tear on existing systems in the building. If you're not firing things up as often, like the maintenance side and operationally, I'm sure it's a good thing for the homeowner or the building owner. What have you found, knowing this, and it should be, like I like to use the term, it's a no-brainer, and much less expensive than installing a new window. We forgot to mention that on the comparative side.
That's where the affordable part comes in, right?
So what do you feel like the market's reaction has been over the last 2 years? And then I want to talk about what we expect it to be maybe over the next few years.
So the past 2 years, I'll actually say past 3 years, have an asterisk on them. We've had COVID, which has impacted everybody and everyone's business and really the whole world. So we expected, because in for example, in New York City, with Local Law 97, we expected people to start moving towards making their buildings much more energy efficient. It turns out in New York City, the city found that about 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the city come from buildings. So anything we could do to knock down energy use or the energy requirements for buildings in New York City would make a big, big difference. But because of COVID, that's delayed things. So I would say that the uptake on this issue has been slower than we anticipated. However, things now are starting to, I'll use Rachel's word, percolate. We're getting inbound requests and interest from people we talked to a few years ago and then never didn't hear anything from them because of COVID.
Right.
So the past few years, I would say, have been disappointing. That's on the one hand. But on the other hand, I'd rather be early, because what that's allowed us to do is build a strong patent portfolio in an area where it's going to be needed. Much of the solution that most people talk about is the electrification of buildings. Well, any engineer, building engineer, will tell you that before you electrify, the first thing you want to do is button up the envelope of the building. That is, make sure you don't lose whatever you're about to put into that building. So what window skins allow, polar skins and solar skins allow, is potential downsizing of equipment requirements for the electrification. That's saving money. In addition, in the electrification, what many people find is that they not only need the equipment, but they need to upgrade the internal electronics, the electrical system of the building. And that can be a very expensive proposition. Anything we can do to keep that from happening is a big plus.
Right. And I do think from COVID was definitely bad for most people, but I think there's silver linings and, things we learn, things we experience. The whole movement towards working from home would mean, like, I'm sitting here having worked from home throughout COVID. If these thankfully are a newer window installation that the building put in maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But if I was like you, home all day, overheated or too cold, being able to have an option like a window skin would mean something more or differently to me than it would have pre-COVID. So that's a good thing. And I do think we're going to like an economic flattening or downturn, and people's, with energy prices at an all-time high, that these types of products will become more mainstream, particularly because, like you said, they're easy to install, which is a check for a building owner or a homeowner or an office building owner or whatever. And they're cost effective versus other options that are out there. So I'm personally, I like that we're putting this on record. I know you're confident you're putting, your life's, learnings and efforts here, as is Rachel, your wife and co-founder. But I'm pretty confident saying we'll look back and be like, remember when we did this interview in 2022, and look at where we're at in 23, 24 and beyond.
Right. So, and John, I'm glad you brought that up, because unlike other technologies that are being undertaken by some startups that I'll say have a more techie feel to them, this movement from everybody going to the office to many more people working remotely from their homes means that a product that works in a residential environment, either single family or apartment, is a huge, huge winner going forward. And that's something that we absolutely want to exploit, where others, I think, are going to be challenged to do that from both a cost standpoint as well as other technical aspects that are just difficult to overcome in the environment that you just described.
And we had this running joke, and I think it's a good segue to what you just said, is when you think of technology, you think of digital, something that's digital, a digital application. And when I said to you, if I introduce you, Ron is the founder of Wex, and they have a product, you would be quick to say, John, we actually have a technology. How do you actually define, with your background and knowledge, what makes Wex and the work you've done a technology versus just a product? Or do all products, are they a form and have an element of technology? Just give that wisdom to the audience here.
Sure. So I would say, by definition, if somebody is selling a product, then they're delivering at some level a technology. Our society now, though, has attached to the word tech or technology that it has to be electronic, optic, some magic whiz-bang thing. But look, I went to two, I'll say, pretty well-known schools that have that word in their name, technology. And I studied chemistry there. It just, it wasn't the tech that people talk about, but there is chemical technology. And some miraculous things happen there as well. But what I do want to say is, behind this relatively simple product that I described in what we'll check when we rewind the video, maybe 30 seconds, that was based on simple physics and simple technology. There's a lot of data handling, and there's a lot of real tech going on behind the scenes. So we have a workflow platform that we call Windowware, which allows us to capture information that's needed to spec our product, our polar skins and solar skins. So somebody has to get that data in. It has to be managed properly. That data is used to quote projects. It's used into manufacturing and allow us to specify what needs to be made. Where is it going to be delivered? How's it going to get packaged? Where's it going to be delivered? Are there rebates or incentives attached to that given order? All of that, there's a lot of data handling that's going on in the background. And that actually, from a business standpoint, is critical, because you can quickly bog down a business if you're not able to handle what I'll say is there's a relatively large amount of complex information, but we've been able to simplify.
And even if you look at this window shade that I dropped here, given that it's we started this at 1 p.m. and the sun was hitting my face, I experienced someone manually coming out to measure my windows to do the window or the solar shade, and it didn't line up perfectly. So the pure technology side of Wex in this Windowware family is, an additional exciting product, essentially, that you will be, pushing in the market in the year ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the things that I just described that we do for our products are directly transferable to any window-related product. Absolutely.
Totally. So, and I failed to mention that you are calling in, I think you said it, from Rochester. So I like to announce first, this is the first interview with a resident and someone that's entrenched in the Rochester community and the Rochester tech community and startup community. So shout out to all the people that are doing great work from your town and city.
Thank you. And there is a lot of really, really good work going on here. And one thing that I didn't mention throughout all of this is we have made use of New York, a lot of upstate New York, vendors and contractors. Our manufacturing is in upstate New York. And it's an important point here is that we have an extremely cost competitive product. It's made right here. And that's something that I'll say much of the technology and business world is now coming to realize that actually being able to do that in a, I'll say, more local or more regional way, that's the path forward. And
Totally.
that's how we started the business, and we're continuing to have success with that.
So founded and made in the USA. It's always a good ending.
100% made in the USA.
And I am truly looking forward to 2023 for Ron and Rachel and the team at Wex. I think sky's the limit. As you know, living in New York, every time I walk on the street and you talk about an addressable market, there's no company I'm working with that I have to say, this is a massive opportunity here. And we could tell you could build your product, we could market it, we could talk to people. Ultimately, we need the industry and leaders to opt in further that this has a real place and it does good for people and the environment and the future of our own lives and our kids' lives. So hoping the future is extremely bright.
John, all I can say is amen to that, all of that. Thanks so much.
All right. So this will be our final School of Fish interview of 2022. And as they say in the world of production, it's a wrap. So thanks, Ron, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for having me, John.